Welcome back to the Walkoff Mariners podcast. We got another edition this week. My name is Jordy Bott. We're changing things up this week. We have no Juan Forno. Joining me instead is one of the hosts of the original Walkoff podcast, Scott Belford. Scott, thank you so much for filling in.
Jordy, I'm so excited to be here, buddy. I love to talk some Mariners. And of course, with Juan needing to play husband, he was getting shit from his girlfriend that all his Sundays were taken up and he wasn't allowed to able to go out and lavish her in good meals and arcade games. I guess that's what he was saying. He's taking her to the arcade. What a gentleman, right?
I think it's more so he was too embarrassed after admitting that he doesn't know who Lisa Loeb is. So I don't think we gave him enough shit for that. All right. So you found out. So you agreed to do this yesterday and you watched yesterday's Mariners game, the Saturday game against the Angels.
Yes, I did.
You got a good game to watch. After seeing that, I was like, maybe Scott should just watch every Mariners game.
I know. I watched the game and I was like, what are they talking about? This team produces all sorts of runs. It's kind of funny. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, you spent how long just watching this group chat of me and Juan complaining about this offense, and you turn it on and they win 9-0. And they're like, they got Cole Tucker pitching against them.
Man, and you know what was really funny? And I know I made the joke in the group chat there with you boys, but the second that Bo Bichette started to get named around the league as a guy who might be available, of course, all the lists came out of teams that would be interested. The Seattle Mariners right near the top. And then who comes out? J.P. Crawford is like, don't you even think about going and go get Bo Bichette. You already have a very good shortstop right here. Look at me hitting grand slammies.
Have you seen J.P. Crawford's numbers since 2023 with the bases loaded?
No.
Okay, hold on. I got to pull those up. So J.P. Crawford with bases loaded since 2023, 650 average, 3 doubles, a triple, 3 grand slams, 591 OBP. His average is higher than his OBP, 1350 slugging, 1941 OPS.
So my question for you is, do you believe in clutch? And if so, is J.P. Crawford a clutch guy? Because, man, it is really weird to watch a dude like Crawford, who obviously struggles with the offensive side of the game from time to time, does tend to get overlooked by other pitching staffs at times, right? Winds up closer to the bottom of that Mariners batting order in a lot of cases. Do you think there is something to when the chips are down, having that ice water in your veins and being able to produce?
I am going to quote someone else on this one because I cannot put it more perfectly than how Jake Mintz put it once on the Barbacast. He said about 10% of players are just cowards. And so when it comes to that, they just crush under defeat. And then there's 10% of guys who just get put in that moment and they step it up. They are absolutely invincible. And then the other percent just play the exact.
And then there's 80% that is all sample size. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone else is just like, does the exact same thing. But there's a very small number of guys who are like, yes, this is my moment. I'm stepping up. And I think J.P. Crawford is one of those guys, which is why we got to get him into more playoffs.
I mean, dude, since he has returned from the IL, we've seen him produce with this Mariners team. It's been pretty impressive. I mean, even if you look at what the Mariners have done over the last week, right? They're 5-1 in their last 6 games, just swept the Angels. I know the Angels suck, but still division rival. And then they go 2-1 against the Astros. Again, another division rival. And when you start piling up the W's against teams within your own division, I mean, it just means good news. They have a 4-game lead right now over the Rangers, a 5-game lead over the Astros that are starting to show some life, but comfortably in first place in the AL West.
It is 7.5 over the Astros right now. And just to correct you, they went 3-1 against the Astros It was a 4-game series
Oh,
against
I don't.
Houston.
They went 3-1. Well, that's even better.
I know. And I've been stressing this all season with Juan is those divisional matchups because the division's going to be tight and we've discussed it. It doesn't look like anyone in this division is going to be getting the wild card spot. So these games are so important when it comes to the tiebreaker that we need a winning record against Houston. We need a winning record against Texas. And right now we have that. And we just got to keep that up because the last 3 years, the Mariners have been within 2 games of the playoffs, whether they're in or out. So these are so important. So it's always good when you can win these divisional matchups.
Does pitching hold up? Right now, you folks in Mariners Nation have a pretty damn good starting rotation to enjoy. I mean, really top to bottom. Even guys that are filling in are doing incredible work here. You know, like the Bryce Millers and the Brandon Woos of the world have really been there for you.
Ryan Woo, Scott.
Ryan, sorry, Ryan Woo.
Brian.
But you know what, man? They've held up even under injuries. This has been your strength all year long. Obviously, there's concern about the offense, and I mean, we'll get into the firing that happened, I'm sure. But does the pitching, starting-wise, hold up over the full 162? Because I'm starting to believe. I was betting against it, and I'm starting to believe.
I think so. I think it's going to. Luis Castillo is just we know exactly what Luis Castillo is. Yeah. That's not going to be an issue. I think the rest of the staff there are young. Like Kirby and Gilbert are still pretty young. Wu and Miller are both even younger. So there are going to be a couple rough stretches, especially from Miller and Wu. That's to be expected. But I think over a 162 game season, it's going to be pretty much like this. They're not going to be like what they were doing that run where everyone was just unhittable, what the 21 starts with 2 runs or less. Not going to be like that all the time. We're definitely going to get some rough stretches there, but over a 162 game season, I am loving the way that the rotation is looking. And if there are injuries, Hancock has been filling in pretty well for us when we needed him.
He's been actually a bit of a godsend for you guys, actually. And I mean, that's one thing that a lot of teams don't have is that starting pitching depth. And that is one place where Dipoto and the front office has done a good job of backfilling that rotation. You know, like as a Jays fan, the biggest Achilles heel with the Blue Jays organization is their lack of ability to develop players within. And I think the player development within the Seattle Mariners is so impressive. And you just keep churning out more and more starting pitching, and the depth you have and the ability that the next guy up type of thing is really impressive. And honestly, it's even kind of impressive with the bullpen. And I know the bullpen isn't as rock solid as the starting pitching is, but I mean, we watched Kirby Snead get called up and has been very admirable for you as a lefty in the pen there. We watched, who was it? Spear just went down?
Yeah, Gabe Spire.
Spire. See, this is my problem, and I'm sorry, everyone in Mariners land. I know you're all going to be like, who is this idiot?
We got to get you the phonetic pronunciations.
I really do need the phonetic pronunciation. I don't screw that up.
I'll take the L on that one.
Okay. As long as someone is taking it for me. I should know better, though.
It's funny you bring the bullpen up because one of the things I want to discuss about something that happened this week is the Friday game. Brian Wu got a start. He was awesome. He was so good, and he was pulled after 66 pitches. Now, Brian Wu, multiple injuries. This is his second year. He's had a lot of injury issues, so obviously they are taking it a little slow for him. But and keep in mind, too, the Mariners at this point by Friday, they hadn't had a day off in 2 weeks. Tomorrow is their first day off in over 2 weeks. So the bullpen has gotten a lot of work. So do you think having a guy, obviously you want to protect him, But do you think 66 pitches is a little too much, a little too babying him?
Man, that's a really hard question, especially with the onslaught of arm injuries we've watched over the last 12 months. It has increased. And I mean, even over the last 5 years, obviously, Tommy John surgeries are up. So when you have a guy coming off of the IL like Wu, a dude who is obviously pretty integral to the back end of that starting rotation, yeah, maybe you could have let him go a little longer, but I would rather err on the side of caution, especially being you're playing the Angels and it worked out. You know, like if it didn't work out, we could be having a different conversation here, but it did. So sometimes you just got to take your W's and be pleased with the fact that the guy you were trying to protect was protected and the bullpen can take their lumps.
Sometimes you got to take your W's is pretty much going to be the motto of the Mariners this season. After we've had so many high stress wins that are just in the last couple innings where that's and afterwards, because even Juan brought it up at the Houston series, we won the first three, lost the first one in what might be the worst effort from the offense this year, which is also funny because we've said that multiple times, being like, oh, this is the worst performance for the offense. But he was like, how do we win 3 of 4 and still feel like garbage? But it's one of those, it's how you win. 2 of those games, we never had a lead. And then all of a sudden we won them. So it was like high vibes, but the offense just didn't perform. And so it's one of those things you can celebrate it right when it happens. And then afterwards, when the loss happens, you're like, yeah, these guys suck right now.
But I don't think you're alone, though, Jordy. And I mean, every Mariners fan that is feeling this way obviously was on the right track because we just watched the Seattle Mariners let go of their bench coach and offseason, an offensive coordinator, Brant Brown, right? And of course, he was the dude they picked up over the offseason. 2 months of him on the job, obviously they didn't like what they were seeing because he is fired. So for this fan base to be like, even though we are literally taking those W's, we're beating these division rivals, we're doing it in a way that definitely makes you sweat, definitely makes you tug at your collar and go, if things go even just a little differently, we are screwed. I mean, the front obviously felt the same way, no?
Oh, absolutely. And obviously I am in several Facebook groups, so I see the posts, and obviously some of them are just absolutely ridiculous. But the fans are upset with the offense, justifiably so. They're calling for heads to roll, and I guess front office was like, "All right, we need to fire someone." I don't know why you fire the guy with 2 months on the job. Um, Maybe he was
Now,
just
hold on,
tired.
hold on. I just want to stop you here because I am curious on your thoughts on this because I don't know the inner workings of the Seattle front office. Is this a lamb out to slaughter type of scenario? Is this a giving in to pressure from the fan base to do something, and it's just the guy with the least tenure that has wound up getting the axe? Or is this a sign that there was an actual problem with Brown as an offensive coordinator? They didn't feel he was presenting the right information. Who knows what analytics or what process he was giving to these hitters going to the plate. I mean, the Mariners do strike out a lot, but I mean, you talked about it when we were on Long Toss, right? Like if you just look at the deep analytics on it, there's swing processes, right? No, like they are making good contact.
Yeah, and their issue mostly is making contact within the strike zone. They're laying off bad pitches. Their pitch selection is really good, like some of the best in the league. The issue is when it's in the zone, they're just not making enough contact. And maybe it's a timing issue. Maybe they are bad at judging what the pitch is, any of that. And I don't know how much you can lay on the offensive coordinator. But to go back to your previous question, if it's kind of folding to the fans or if it's something that he disagreed with the philosophy. I think it's going to be the second one because if there's one thing we know about Jerry in the front office, they don't really care about what the fans. I don't mean it, and they don't care if the fans are having a good time, but they understand they're not going to fold to fan pressure. They're like, yeah, whatever. You guys say what you want. We're just going to keep doing
whatever.
our thing.
As long as we get 54% of those W's,
Exactly.
we're happy.
Yeah, we just need our 54%. But I think Jerry and company, they're very committed to their plan. They don't like to fold away from it. We've seen it a lot this year, especially with our lefty righty matchups, which we'll get into later. So part of me thinks that Brant Brown was bringing in a different philosophy, and they were like, sorry, dude, this isn't what we want to be teaching. It's just not going to work out. Because that's the only reason I can think why you would fire a guy 2 months onto the job. Like, that's not enough time to kind of get in impact, to get going with these guys. They need more time than that.
It is a curious scenario because there is value in having outside voices. There is value in different opinions. Although that said, there is also obviously value in cohesiveness and one message. And maybe you're right. Maybe there was multiple messages being given, multiple different plans when it comes to stepping into the box and what you're doing with your swing. And maybe that's what it was. As an outsider's perspective, though, Jordy, it feels weird to watch a guy get fired after 2 months. Why was he hired?
Yeah.
Like, why was he hired then?
That's exactly my thinking.
Because it's one of those things where it looks kind of bad on the front office where you're like, well, you made this decision and it wasn't even that long ago. Was it that you didn't do your homework then? Why did you hire this guy if within a month you disagree with everything he's saying? That just seems like bad due process.
Yeah, it's so weird. And I 100% agree. It's like, how did you guys not see whatever happened? How did you not see this one coming? And maybe there's going to be more to the story coming out later on. I would love to hear from Brant Brown. Maybe he's a little bit sour, but
we should reach out and get him on the podcast is what we should do, buddy.
Oh, let's do it. We'll call him. I'll send out some emails. But one thing that's kind of funny to me is, so he did this. They let him go right before the Angels series, in which they scored 19 runs in 3 games. And maybe he was the problem. Obviously, that's a joke. I understand scoring 19 runs against the Angels in a 3-game sample isn't going to be like, oh, offense is fixed. No notes. We don't need to trade anyone.
No notes. Moving forward.
All right, guys. Should we plan the parade? We're winning the division now. So coming up this week, we've got Oakland and Kansas City. And most importantly, tomorrow, finally an off day after over 2 weeks of no off days. We finally get that one. So it's going to be so nice. What is your prediction for Oakland and Kansas City? What would you, as an outsider, what would you set expectations for? What do you think Mariners fans should set their expectations for? Let me just check to see how many games are of each. So we got 3 Oakland, 3 Kansas City.
So I will say, Jordy, that of these 2 series, Oakland is incredibly important that you guys take that series. Divisional rival. Oakland has been far better than I think people were giving them credit for. This is still a team that is a below 500 team. They are still not expected to win anything. They are going to play spoiler for the whole season, though. And you don't want to wind up losing 2 of 3 to them going into Kansas City because they play Oakland first, correct?
Yes. Yeah, Oakland starting Tuesday and then Kansas City on the weekend.
Listen, the Blue Jays have already played their 6 games against Kansas City, and it did not go well. They won 2 out of the 6. And Kansas City is for real. Let me tell you, this is a really good
They're
team.
so fast too. They're scared. They get on base. You're like, oh God, what's gonna happen?
They play a hard brand of baseball to defend against, especially with the new rules, with the pickoff attempts and the larger bases, and they are taking advantage of it. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. is a menace out there on the base path, and he's not alone. They're seeing big time production out of their third baseman, Mikhail Garcia, who no one saw this coming, right? Garcia has been a godsend for that team. And the pitching has come together. So Kansas City is for real. I think that you concentrate on Oakland. You don't look ahead of them. I know it's going to be tempting to do so coming off an off day, knowing that you need to make that trek. Is the Oakland series? I should have looked this up, and my apologies for everyone here.
All away games, if that's what you're gonna
They're
ask.
all away games. So I was just going to say, then it's easy, quick jaunt to Oakland, right? Quick plane ride from Seattle to Oakland, and then you've got to go across the country to the
All the way
Midwest
to
to Kansas
Kansas
City.
City.
Yeah.
The
So
next day.
no, don't overlook Oakland. You got to take 2 of 3. If I'm going to make a prediction, I think if you can split the next 6 games, you're right on par with what you got to be, especially if it's not losing ground to Oakland in the division.
All right. And then a couple more topics to discuss with you, and then I'll let you go. I know it's getting late over in Ontario. We're getting close to your bedtime. But one thing I would really like to hear your perspective on this, because I mentioned it earlier. I kind of touched on this, but Scott Service is so committed to his lefty righty matchups. And it got to a point earlier this week where I was like, this is unacceptable. So to paint you the picture, so it's the 8th inning, bottom of the 8th inning against Houston, tie game, runner in scoring position. Josh Rojas stepping up to the plate against Josh Hader. Oh, I didn't even notice they were both Joshes. That makes it even more annoying. They would have had a battle of the Joshes. But Josh Rojas has been one of our best hitters all season. Gets pulled in favor of Ryan Bliss, who at that time had 2 major league games under his belt, 0 hits. And the only thing is it was the lefty righty matchup, which all year me and Juan have been discussing this. It's just getting so ridiculous. But I found this to be honestly unfair to Ryan Bliss. The guy's has 2 plate appearances, and they're like, all right, so you haven't seen a pitch all day. Go up against Josh Hader, who's having a rough season, but he's still Josh Hader. Do you think it's kind of an overreaction on our part, or do you think this kind of like anger we have towards all these lefty righty matchups, the dedication, do you think it's justified as fans?
So I will start with saying I do not know Josh Rojas' splits. If he is god awful against lefties, then I understand the pull. But if his splits, and this is one thing that gets lost sometimes amongst managers, is that the old school guys will go to the righty lefty split and they will ignore them if the handedness is the same. And I think that's so silly because there's just guys who hit really well against righties, even if they're, it doesn't matter what side of the plate they hit from.
Luke Raley is actually. Luke Raley is a great example of that. He hits lefties pretty well as another lefty, but he doesn't face lefties at all this season. And it's like, why, dude?
I think that this is very much a frustration that is league wide. I know that we really went through a phase in Toronto where the fact there wasn't a lefty in the lineup was the biggest thing everyone could talk about. And it was the search for the lefty bat. And to get these lefties in the lineup, they were moving away from the Teoscar Hernandez power and the Lourdes Gurriel Jr. average and all of these guys that you thought you could bring in a lefty and make this lineup more balanced. And it really backfired for the Jays. And you need to be careful with looking a gift horse in the mouth, I guess is what I'm saying. Because if Josh Rojas hits lefties well, then removing him for a rookie seems crazy. And there's also something to be said for putting a rookie in a position We know how sports psychology works. We know how fragile athletes can be at times, right? Everyone talks about mental toughness, but it works the other way as well, right? There's nobody more superstitious than baseball players because it's the streakiest sport on the planet, right? There's always the guys who are super hot, and there's always the guys that are super cold, and you're never as good as either one, or you're never as good as you are or as bad as you are as when you're streaking or slumping. So to take a rookie who has never been put in that situation in the big leagues and put him in that pressure cooker. I know we saw a similar thing in Toronto. They called up Addison Barger. He's a AAA outfielder who had never played left field. He'd never taken one left field rep, and he was put in left field for his first game ever. And he made some mistakes, and the fans were on him, and it just seemed like a very unfair situation to put him in. So I feel for Ryan Bliss, and I would need to see the splits on Rojas to really, truly make a decision there. But it seems silly to it be a hard, fast rule, righty lefty, late in the game that you have to put in a pinch hitter in that scenario.
You know what it reminds me of? It's very Mr. Burns-esque, where you're pulling Darryl Strawberry in favor of Homer. It's like, oh, but you don't understand.
I like the splits.
He's a righty. He's like, I have 6 home runs today. He's like, oh, but I'm going for the matchup.
What is your thoughts on it? Like, obviously there is, I think it is really important to look at the analytics and to come up with, it's very important to take the information that is out there and make an educated decision on what way you're going, one way or the other. And I think to have a hard, fast, it's got to be late in a game, we're going to go with the matchups every single time and ignore the splits, or if one-handedness hits the other one well and taking them out just so that it's a lefty-righty matchup. It does seem silly, but I also know how analytical Seattle is, and maybe there was a really good reason for it. I don't know enough about the situation to really, I feel like, make a truly hard, fast opinion on it, but it is silly to constantly go with the lefty-righty matchup just to have that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, and that's why it's so weird. Like, I used Luke Raley as an example earlier because he is kind of a victim of the lefty righty matchups, even though he does decently well against lefties. And as you mentioned, Seattle is a very analytics heavy team. They go into it, they buy into it. They've got specific guys, like they hired some other guys in the offseason here specifically for studying analytics and strategizing that. So it's so weird to me why they just kind of go so basic in the lefty righty matchups. Like, I just assume there would be more strategy to it from them.
You would assume so, but again, I mean, who knows, man? Especially with the firing that just happened. Maybe the coaching staff, like, maybe there's good reason for it. I don't know.
Maybe that's the offensive coordinator who's in charge.
That was the reason. Yeah, that's right. That's why he's gone.
They're like, hey man, people do not like your matchup calls. We're getting rid of you. So we got a couple minutes here before we go. This is just going to be kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the clip, but after JP Crawford hit that walk-off sack fly, there was a video posted of his dogs just howling and going nuts. And I was kind of caught off guard because there were just 3 big huskies. And he doesn't seem like the type of guy that would have 3 big huskies. When I think what kind of dog JP Crawford would have, I think of like a golden retriever, right? Like,
okay.
Right? You're like, it's not the fastest dog, but when you watch it run, you're like, that's majestic. That's awesome. And so now I kind of started trying to figure out what other pets would be perfect for Mariners players. And so with Julio Rodriguez, I thought exactly of my parents' dog. It's like a pit bull mastiff cross. So it's like pretty big, but like just jacked, can't be moved. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly it. And then I thought Ty France would be like one of those guys who has a cat, but like ended up with it. You know, those people, they're like, yeah, no, it's just the cat just kept hanging around. So I let him in. I don't really like them that much. That's how I imagine Ty France. Luke Rayleigh, I just assume would have like a pet buffalo or something. So I'm wondering for you as a Blue Jays fan, what are some pets that you can think of for Blue Jays players?
So I always I love this question, by the way. The Afghan hound, you know, the one with the long like ears, hair kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah,
Bo Bichette. All
yeah.
right.
They're both just
Vladdy,
swaying in the wind. They're running
yeah,
beside each
just
other.
swaying in the wind, right? I like Vladdy, like a similar to what you just said there for Raleigh, like a big like pit bull style dog there, but
Yeah, just
maybe a little
jacked. You can't move the dog.
now a little junk in the trunk, like a well-fed, kind of like not fat, but like probably could
Burly.
tone up. The burly, exactly. Great way of putting it. And then ooh, I mean, Chris Bassett, I don't know why. It's because he has hound dogs. And like I had his bobblehead. They had the hound bobblehead day and it's got his dogs and they're just two hound dogs. So how do you not pick hound dog for Chris Bassett, the hound? But yeah, this is a fun little exercise. You should have given me a heads up and I would have been way better at this.
Well, I was just kind of thinking, I feel like Kevin Kiermaier, I don't know what kind of dog it is, but it would be a really annoying dog to play fetch because the ball would never land. Every time you throw the ball, it would just bolt off and catch it. It's like that video of the guy at the Calgary Stampeders game throwing his frisbee like across the entire field and the dog running it down and catching it. That's what I imagine Kevin Kiermaier's dog would be.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then he picks up a stick and he can't hit shit, but catch anything in the field. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's all we'll talk about. Scott, once again, thank you so much for filling in for Juan. Juan,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a blast. I'm sure Juan will be back next week. He's probably like stocked up so much podcast time after going to the arcade.
Exactly. Exactly. So much goodwill. Just goodwill
exactly.
with his girlfriend, right? So that's big. That's huge. Honestly, to everyone who followed along, thank you so much. Drop your comments. Would love to hear what some of you are thinking. What are some of the if the Seattle Mariners were dogs, who would be what? I want to see this. I want to revisit this later.
Scott, where can people find you if they want to join discussions or check your content?
So if there's anyone out there who is a Blue Jays fan, even just a little bit, you can follow us at Walkoff Podcast on Twitter, the Walkoff Podcast on Instagram, and wherever you get your podcasts, we're on all of the platforms out there.
All right. Well, thanks again, Scott. If you want to follow us, well, you managed to get here, so you probably know the links and whatnot, how to find the podcast. But make sure to follow us on Walkoff Mariners, subscribe on YouTube, join in on the conversation with the comments. Whatever you think, maybe you have some wild conspiracy as to why Brant Brown got fired. We would love to hear it. Thanks again so much for listening. Have a great rest of your week and go Mariners.